Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. So we're moving forward. Darren, let's start back right with who inspired your musical prowess. So you were sharing about Third Street Church of God. All that was some wonderful information. Go ahead.
Yeah, Third Street Church of God was my formative years. I was inspired by Vivian Owen Reed. She was the principal choir director with the choral ensemble. And also in that same church, Sandra Key, Evelyn Carrington. I mean, just a rich tradition from
Wow.
everything from sacred anthems to gospel. So I mean, I would go to rehearsal. My parents both sang in that choir, so I would go, rehearsal every Thursday. Steve Key was there. We were all kind of hanging out.
Wow.
That was kind of formative in terms of just developing and being inspired by her. And then there was a sister church, Righteous Church of God, and there was a gentleman named William Vicks who, I mean, just his intros and his transitions between songs was just cinematic, and it was, I mean, motifs. He was a genius. And then my sister bought me my first album from Kent Mill Records in Landover Mall, Richard Smallwood, the Richard Smallwood Singers. And then from there it was just everything Richard Smallwood. I mean, I started my own group at 11, Voices of Praise, which was modeled after Richard, and we did just 100% of my set was Richard Smallwood's music. Yeah, we sang at our conventions, our camp meetings all over the country, open for the Winans one year. So everything I did from that moment was just all Richard. Like,
That
yeah, yeah,
wow. So the Church of God really had a rich, yeah, well, and those particular churches have really inspired your musical. I can see that now. That is
yeah,
amazing.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, just the culture of the Church of God. Julia Childs, who's one of the foremost female pastors,
Yes.
yeah, she comes out of that tradition as well. So yeah, just huge.
Wow. So we move on. We move on, Darren, to now that you're an undergrad. You decide to make decisions for undergrad while you're in that area. So tell us, where did you just finally decide, and what was your major? How that all come about? It's an interesting story. Go ahead,
Yeah,
tell us.
I went to Morgan. In high school, at 4 years, I was in the inroads program. So I worked with my dad in the accounting department, and I thought I was going to actually go to college to be an accountant. I got a scholarship to go to Morgan on an accounting scholarship, and I got there, and my cousin, first week of school, Kishna Davis Fowler now, who was studying voice, she said, "You need to come over here and meet Dr. Carter." This is the second week of school. I went over, went in his office, and he's up there like the Godfather behind his desk.
Yeah.
He's like, I hear you play piano. I hear you. And he said, play something for me. So I played. I don't know what I played. I might have played I Love the Lord or something. He said, listen, what are you doing over that side of the, I mean, what are you doing on the other side of the campus studying accounting? And I said, well, I'm going to be an accountant. Maybe I'll play in church or something. He said, no, 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 no. We got to get you over here. I said, well, if you can convince my dad to let me change my major, we're all good. Because my dad was big on, hey, get you a solid job, get you a solid career, and do your whole music thing on the side. So yeah, Dr. Carter called my dad the next day, and I changed my major, and everything was history from there. And Morgan,
That,
enrolled in Morgan as a piano performance major.
wow. I want to take this moment right here. I do want to go on and talk more about your memorable experiences at Morgan. But you mentioned your dad and your mom. They played some major roles. I know you lost them both within
Yeah,
the span of
yeah,
the last
yeah,
5, 6 years. Tell us a little bit about your relationship and then your family. I know you have a sister. So tell us
yeah,
about your upbringing with your
yeah.
parents. It seemed like it was a very musical family. I know they missed that, some of that.
Sure, sure. Yeah, my mom was a pianist. She's a contralto. She went to Spelman and wanted to go to New York, to Juilliard or Manhattan to study at that time, but my grandmother wouldn't let her. My dad is very musical as well. Music runs deep in my family. When my great aunt passed away, we were going through her things, and I found the gramophone 78s of Schubert and Beethoven at the time that we didn't know that we had that history back in the 20s. And then both of my sisters are musical. And my brother, older brother, is a percussionist, chef now. But yeah, just very musical upbringing, and they help to cultivate and nurture the gift that I have just by surrounding me with so much of the culture of church and the culture of music in our home. Mom and dad, my mother was a culture. That's where I get all this culture thing. I mean, she was just big on, you're going to go check out Ailey, you're going to check out the NSO, you're going to check out all of this. So it was you know, my foundation for everything that I'm exploring right now. But very close knit family, very, faith based, spiritual. I mean, just spirituality and the church was very
Mm,
everything we did. So, and my dad
that's
was,
one.
yeah, yeah.
So that's interesting. So you said you really had a lot of confidences in your dad. Your dad was a great model. So now he challenges you. Send Nathan Carter, Dr. Nathan Carter said, look, if you want me to be a piano major in this music department, you got to convince my dad. So your dad had a strong arm. So he convinced your dad. Are you saying your dad was convinced?
He was convinced enough to let me pursue it. He didn't
Okay.
come around until much later in my career when I did my first my debut with the NSO, which we can get to later, where he kind of understood and respected it as a pursuit in terms of what I was going to do as a lifetime. But yeah, it took a while for him to get around. Yeah.
So Darren, so tell us now you're at Morgan State. What are so many you're really inspired by the music there, the choir, the composition status of Dr. Carter, and then you're becoming more of a musician. You're really seeing your gifts come forward. Tell us some of your memorable experiences at Morgan.
Yeah, I mean, the first day I met Dr. Carter, I had never met anybody like this man. I mean, someone who had come from Selma, Alabama, and gotten his master's from Peabody, a doctorate from Juilliard. I mean, just the whole way that he approached life and culture, music, and the experience of singing everything from spirituals to popular music, and how he kind of juxtaposed all of that with our studies. And Dr. Carter had a way of making every performance magical. And I just remember being in the culture of the Morgan State Choir and not, being so amazed at the talent in one choir and just the breadth and the depth of the range and the repertoire that we were doing. But my seminal moment was the first year we did a performance with the Baltimore Chamber Orchestra for our spring concert. And it was the first time I was in an environment with a symphony orchestra. And it was like I went from black and white to technicolor. Like my life changed at that moment in that first
Wow.
rehearsal. And I knew it was something. I didn't know how I would get to pursuing that as a career, but that was another moment that kind of changed my life. And Dr. Carter was a taskmaster, man. I mean, his attention to detail, his focus, his preparation with the choir. I mean, it was unlike anything I'd ever seen.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, we saw that so many of your, I see so many amazing talents now that as I look at videos back when you were performing, I think I saw what's the singer that's My Name is Victory, Jonathan Nelson.
Jonathan Nelson, yeah. He came a little bit after me, but yeah, all of them were in that class. Yeah.
In that class, man, there's some amazing musicians, amazing musicians. So now that you've had an impact, what impact would you say? You've mentioned a little bit. What was the impact of Dr. Carter on your musical career, would you say?
Well, Dr. Carter, he saw something in me I didn't see in myself, almost prophetic. The Sun kind of did an article on me my second year of school, and Dr. Carter was quoted in that article saying that I see Darin as a composer and a conductor, and not necessarily what he's doing right now in terms of his piano and gospel music, but it could be in Broadway, it could be in film, it could be in his own direction. And this was, I might have been 20 at the time, had no
Wow.
idea of even thinking about composition or conducting or any of that. So he was able to see something in me that I didn't see in myself and nurture, but he was very tough on me. I mean, Dr. Carter was just very tough on me because I came in with a lot of talent, but I didn't do it. I didn't come in with a lot of study. I didn't study a lot in terms of piano. I didn't have that preparation in terms of musical scholarship until I got to Morgan.
Mm.
So I was a little bit behind a lot of people, but I was a focused student, and just kind of started to dig into it. But yeah, he
Yeah, you
challenged
were
me.
very focused and you played catch up and you did a good job on catch up too. I mean,
I'm still
you moved enough. You put a different name behind catching up. I mean, it's
yeah.
amazing.
I
You did,
got into it,
man.
man. I was 5, 6 hours a day. I mean, when I got to Morgan, I was just piano practice room. Anybody that was there with me at the time would tell you I was just all that was completely focused.
So you mentioned that your group, your early starting on in the churches and everything, you formulated a group early, your early studies, and you loved Richard Small when you received the album. So how did you align yourself with Richard Smallwood and record some of his albums? How did that all happen when we're moving now to the stage of your conducting, your writing,
Right.
orchestral works
Right.
arranged? So how did all that relationship even formulate? And how did you get to the album?
Richard came to Morgan to do a concert with the Richard Smallwood Singers. I think it was my second year in the spring. And Dr. Carter had me play for him. They came back to a reception and I played with the choir. And I think Richard tucked that away. And then 2 years later, Richard called me and asked me to go on the road with him as a keyboard player. So I went on the road with Richard in '91, and I was on the road with him for 3 or 4 years. And that was surreal for me. I mean, growing up playing his music, being a master of his music, I went to audition in sorts at Richard's house, maybe a week after he called me, and his mom was there, and I was playing piano. She came in and said, "Richard, is that you?" And it was, of course, it was me. But I mean, we're in the same orbit. There's so many things about us just musically that was just so obvious when we connected. And so just going on the road with him was just, it was my dream.
Yeah.
Nothing could be any better at 20 than being on a tour bus with the smallest singers. And they treated me like their little brother, their son. It was an amazing period of time for me. And so then I did some self-study, and I performed in my first piano concerto with the National Symphony Orchestra in '95.
Mhm.
And Richard was at that performance, and he said, "Man, I had no idea that you were doing this level of composing." I mean, I basically had sequestered myself away for 2 years to do self-study, and then I got an opportunity from an outreach program to perform a concerto that I had composed. And from that, Richard, we transitioned to him asking me to begin to orchestrate um, Healing. That was the first project that we connected on. And I did Healing, and then everything that he did, in terms of a writer, songwriter with Karen and Yolanda, That Name, Secret Place with Karen. I mean, I did string arrangements for Richard. And so he gave me that was my start in terms of real orchestration and string arrangement. Richard, again, just trusting me, trusting the gift of
Mm,
somebody with a discography already 20 years of recording under his belt that's gonna, trust me to, orchestrate
right.
and arrange. So
So tell us, is this part of the transition from piano, concert pianist to now? How did you navigate that, or how did you realize you had the gift in composing or orchestrating and then conducting? So how did all that transfer from being a concert pianist to that? Where those gifts were they formulating? Were they stewing up somewhere? How did all that come about?
yeah, they were definitely stewing, and I didn't realize it until another professor at Morgan, Dr. Melvin Miles, who's over the band and concert orchestra. I was in a practice room, and he said, "You're a composer," and I was like, "What are you talking about?" I'm practicing piano, I'm doing my own thing. He said that the way that you approach the piano harmonically, you're thinking of it as an orchestra. And he said the moment that you start to put pencil to paper, everything's going to change for you, because right now
Wow.
kind of you're kind of constrained to these 10 fingers, but when you begin to open that up, you're going to see that your world is much more expansive than beyond what you're able to play. And so that's kind of unlocked something in me that I wanted to explore. And from there I started, Morgan didn't have a composition program, and this thing was on me so strong that I literally did self-study. I bought all the scores of all the great classic CDs, and I went to the Kennedy Center in the Meyerhoff every Friday night, and I just
Hmm.
listened and just absorbed and immersed myself in that world. And kind of backed into composition. Me and Winton talk about it all the time, because both of us kind of backed into it in a certain way of being more practical than theoretical, and then theoretical on the back end. So I got
Mm.
into composition and arranging, and everything else took off from there.
Mm, mm, mm.
Yeah.
You're also a renowned composer, and have premieres of your composition in places like the White House, all over the world. So what goes into process? What goes into your process of composing, arranging, and producing various types of music? What goes in? You talked a little bit about that, how you extrapolate different sounds or different moods. Tell us what's your process? How do you do that, Dan?
Yeah, I typically work from a narrative. I mean, I have to be inspired by something that is resonating with me in terms of something I want to contribute to the canon, whether it's in jazz or gospel or just American culture. So I work from a narrative, and then I frame everything around that narrative and begin to scale and have an architecture and an artistic scaffold in terms of what I want to do in terms of orchestration and composition. And then it's kind of working from that framework in terms of how we speak and frame the orchestration around our American voice versus something that's basically an absolute, theoretical process in terms of new music or classical composition. So that's always, I'm very intentional about making sure that my sound is steeped in our tradition and into the American roots and vernacular, whether that comes out of the church or whether that comes out of jazz or pop music. So that's all of that's just very intentional for me. And then everything else is goes back to being very practical in terms of orchestration and balance and textures and all the things that you have to know as an orchestrator and arranger and a composer.
Wow, wow, that.
Yeah.
So we now have your work, Proclamations, was developed, I believe, in 1996.
Yep.
So you mentioned that mentioned about Richard. Heard your debut with the National Symphony Orchestra. Was that Proclamations? Was that particular?
No, the first piece that the NSO commissioned me was the piano concerto, which is a one movement work that I want to actually re-explore soon. And then from that, they commissioned me the next year to do a piece with the Cathedral Choral Art Society, J. Raleigh Lewis.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. At the cathedral with Stanley Thurston and the community. There was an outreach choir that Stanley was over. So this was the summer of '96, and Proclamations was performed, composed. They asked me to write something for choir, organ, brass, and it wasn't strings at that time, just timpani, kind of a chamber group. And so at that time, again, most of my work was nested in church and sacred music. So I kind of framed it around Psalm 95 and did an Amen, which is, like the Randall Thompson. So it was kind of being influenced, but still trying to find my way. At that point, I was still trying to find my bridge between being classically influenced and how I was going to kind of make this nexus to American roots music and what I ultimately have been doing with Soulful Symphony. But yeah, that was a
Wow.
great evening. Stanley Thurston conducted that concert, and then that set me off actually to explore composition formally. From that, I applied to Peabody Institute,
Hmm.
and I studied a year and a half there with Morris Cottell at Peabody. So I said, hey, if I'm doing this composing, I need to go and make sure that I have at least some of the fundamentals and technical aspects of it. So I was there for a year, and I did a master's class with John Corigliano. He came down, and we took a break after. Actually, I played Proclamations in that master's class, and he said, man, you have this Quincy Gershwinist thing going on, Copeland thing, and you need to explore that. And I'm not sure like this trajectory that you're on in terms of formal composition, because that's so rooted in you. You may want to just explore that and study privately here and there. That's what I did. I didn't finish Peabody, but I left and kind of started my own thing.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So the Proclamation, that's the piece we performed with you, Boulevard. One piece. And I think we had a question on the floor from brother Kendrick Little said, how can we purchase the piano concerto? Has it been published there?
It hasn't. I'm spending this next 24 months to get all of my music ready for publishing. We've been speaking to a publisher, everything from the concerto to Song in a Strange Land. Just my whole catalog is being.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Oh, this is great. So while serving, we know that you have served, been as a composer in residence with the Baltimore Symphony, or you've conducted, let me say that you've been a guest conductor for various symphonies throughout the country, Baltimore, Dallas, Memphis Brass, we've had your Columbus Symphony. So how does one prepare for that type of platform, Darin? Those persons that are inspiring, that are writing their own works, but they want to get them performed. I know one young composer, graduate school right now, from graduate of Oakwood. He's at University of Memphis, writing some great woodwind stuff. And so he's trying to get on those platforms. How do you recommend a person do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's to be nested. I always say this, in a certain proficiency in terms of where you are. Those avenues are tough to crack because you have to kind of come through an apprenticeship or a fellowship to get those type of opportunities, or your assistant conductor. For me, it was a little different because I was performing my own works, and it would be concerts that kind of suited themselves to new composers or new music. So to come at it from a sense of how do you do it from a student perspective can be a little bit challenging, a little bit difficult. I'm always trying to find ways to embrace and engage what I've been doing with Soulful Symphony into the American orchestra. So when they're calling me to guest conduct or to feature new music with Columbus, for instance, that was me conducting with Richard Smallwood. So
wow,
was there, they asked me to be his guest conductor. Same thing with Dallas Symphony. That was a partnership with what we were doing down there with the Potter's House. So it's hard to kind of navigate those waters. The most traditional path is graduate studies and fellowships and apprenticeships as a guest conductor or student conductor.
Right.
But to go right, from doing anything outside of that, it can be a pretty tough bridge to cross.
Tough bridge to follow. Okay. Yeah. So while serving as composer in residence with the Baltimore Symphony, your collaboration produced many works that became staples in their repertoire. How did that explain that process and how that manifested?
Yeah, well, our partnership with the BSO was a affiliation between Soulful Symphony as a resident ensemble, and then I was composer in residence for the BSO for 7 years. So while I conducted Soulful and we had our concerts, I was also commissioned by the BSO to write a large work every year. So from that came works like Evolution of a People, which is a 12-minute
Mm,
for full orchestra. That was a concert that we did side by side with the BSO. Ellis Marcellus, Winton's younger brother, partnered with me on that. It's the whole history of African Americans with still photography. We did Paint Factory, which is a hip hop symphony.
right, right.
Yeah, and God's Trombone, some of that which we're doing tomorrow. So it was just a great place, to have the BSO, to have Soulful there, and then to be forced to write music every year for such large forces, and to be able to use my voice in Soulful Symphony and the BSO to have a platform for that was just it's been spectacular for me.
That's amazing. So you have appeared regularly as guest conductor and composer with the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra with Wynton Marsalis. That's major. So what is the importance in being able to to be diverse in your repertoire, and how do you ensure that diversity is maintained? I mean, you go from one spectrum there way to. I mean, it's so eclectic, wonderful.
I mean, I think that the important thing is to be kind of rooted in tradition, where there's a sweet spot between the past and the present that you're always aware of. I
Right.
think a lot of times musicians are, they're prisoners of the present in terms of what's going on now in the culture, what their sound is, and not understanding that diversity not only means style, but it means eras and periods. So being able to address the spiritual and the nature of that song and the style of that period, but also be able to address the diversity of what's happening now with new music and technology and workstations. So, and to make yourself open and available in terms of how you begin to situate those things inside of your own sound. I think as musicians, sometimes we compartmentalize the genre and specific,
Right.
but
Right.
we should be able to speak to the whole, history of the human existence. Like
Yeah.
we should be able to deal
Yeah.
with sacred music and secular music. The whole idea of compartmentalizing genres and styles, that's really not an African construct. That's like a new construct that
Mm,
like a 20th
mm,
century construct. I mean, the
wow.
griots and the shamans, all of those, they were able to kind of like speak to the whole realm of human existence. So diversity speaks to being open to everything from multi-generational, from kids to
Yes.
older
Yes.
folks. And so it's important not only in terms of style, but in terms of how you're connected to tradition.
Derek, you just speak further about that. That is, oh wow, that's it's powerful how you define that. So how does that connect with the church?
Well, I think the church is amputated itself in many ways, and of course we're sacred and it's gospel and it's the good news, but there's a whole aspect of our lives outside of the church that we have kind of relegated to secular artists. So this whole demarcation between people being secular and sacred or gospel or pop, I mean, that's like a new paradigm. And the idea of being a musician is to be able to speak to the whole existence of your life, your experience. And if we're ministering to people, or we're having an audience of people who are having the same type of experience, why would we consolidate that to just one aspect of our lives? I mean, there's in most folk cultures, there's no word for art, there's no word for secular. It's just life. And then how do
It's
we
just
begin
like, yes.
yeah, how do we begin to cultivate our music and our expression around that? Um, yeah, it's to only write a certain style of music, even if I was just writing jazz or about this, and not be able to write about what's happening for me socially. It would,
Right.
I'm cutting myself off from my own expression as a person and as an artist. So, and that's challenging in the church. I mean, I know we have dogma and we have tradition and we have liturgy and all those things that we have to protect. But I think, God is everywhere. He's everything. Everything is His. The earth is His.
Yes.
How do
Yes.
we can begin to model that?
Awesome. Tell us so what led to the what led to the founding of Soulful Symphony? Tell us about it. What is the membership about?
Yeah, I started Soulful Symphony. It came from a piece of music I wrote called "Song in a Strange Land." So this was my first foray.
Wow.
Yeah, it was my first foray into how do I begin to make this transition from this classical, real European sound to beginning to embrace our roots music. So I wrote a piece called "Song in a Strange Land," which is an amalgamation of spirituals I wanted to reintroduce the spirituals to genres and the symphony orchestra and orchestral instruments, because the slaves were kind of, they were banned from playing instruments and using
Right.
instruments, the codes and that whole thing. So the spiritual developed as an a cappella tradition. So I said, hey, I want to introduce it to the symphony orchestra. I wrote a piece of music, and I said, hey, we're going to get some musicians together to do one show to actually play this piece of music. And went and came down, played. Aaron
Wow.
Clark cheered, Kim Burrell. We staged it at the Meyerhoff in 2000. And yeah, it was the groundswell of that night was so amazing that, everybody on stage and in the audience knew it was something much bigger than that night. And so, musicians largely African American and Latino, most of them here in the DMV. About 20 or so come from New York every year, every concert. And 19 years later, it's kind of the blueprint of what we've done with Soulful Symphony. First as a repository of my works, and then we've kind of gone on to begin to explore, other genres and composers and aspects of our culture.
And if and every concert and performance has been sold out. I've attended two, and it's been amazing. Tell us something about the venues, how that has grown, your sponsors. I mean, all the. Tell us a little bit how
Yeah,
it's
we
continued to evolve.
started 2000, and then 2 years we formalized the organization, and then 3 years later, the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, they asked us to come on as an artistic affiliate, which means we would be a program of the BSO, sharing space in both the Meyerhoff and Strathmore and Bethesda. And so the sponsorship from around the city has been amazing. We were able to complement what was happening with the major symphony orchestra in the same space, in that we weren't performing classical repertoire. We were doing, the repository of my music. We were doing Billy Childs. We've done David Baker. We've done, of course, gospel. We might have one of the largest compendium catalogs of orchestrated gospel music in terms of what we've done with
Oh,
Ronald Richard, and I mean over the last 15 or so years. That's been a large part of it. Went and I mean just so many areas. William Grant Still, we did that one year. Porgy and Bess. And so the magic of it has been in speaking the music of the native tongue of the community. I mean,
mm,
people here, they come and they hear their experience on stage. So it's not this barrier to etiquette or demystifying what it means to be in a concert hall with all of these, this rich tradition that comes from the Western classical music. They come in and we say, hey, you're in a concert hall, but we may as well be in a jazz club or church. That whole
mm,
call.
right, right, right.
And so as a result of that, I mean, 19 years of sold out performances, because the citizens have taken it, they've taken ownership of it. And it's not just a concert or a show. I mean, it's something that's really baked into the community. And I think I've been intentional about making sure that it wasn't just something that was isolated from
Right.
the experience of what's happening in the fabric of our community.
Wow, that's amazing. So how did you enter into a partnership? And let me ask you this: how did you enter into a partnership with Broadway across America, and what were some of the outcomes of that partnership?
Yeah, our partnership formally ended with the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra in 2009, 10. And then again, as an institution, as an orchestra, unless you have institutional backing and a performance space,
Hmm.
it's very difficult to sustain concerts just to do one-offs. So my goal was always to have us kind of, incubated in some type of performing arts center or some type of organization. So we got the call to be the first resident orchestra at the France Merrick Performing Arts Center, which is probably 5 miles from the Meyerhoff. And their commercial partner is Broadway Across America, that brings in all of Hamilton, Cats, and these theaters across the country. So we partnered with them, and we did kind of the same type of artistic partnership we had at the BSO, where we would do our performances, and then Broadway Across America would be there, and then we would intersect on some educational and outreach programs. So we did that for 3 years at Broadway Across America, their theater in Baltimore.
Wow. Wow. So there, so many of our listeners today may be familiar with one of the longest running pledge specials that airs nationally on PBS, Soulful Symphony with Darin Atwater. So how were you able to elevate the symphony to that national view platform? Man, I've been trying to get just a touch of PBS to look at our Christmas. And I mean, you got this thing locked in. You got it locked. I mean, you got it locked. You got it
Yeah,
locked.
that's a no what you guys doing to be on national telecast. But the local affiliate here, Maryland Public Television, who also did Dr. Nathan Carter, the 25th anniversary and his one in 90, came to me in 2008 and said, "Hey, we should do a special." And actually, that was the downturn, the economic downturn. So, Broadway went black. Everybody was kind of suffering in the
Right.
artistic community. So instead of doing it live, we did it in studio at Maryland Public Television. And we said, hey, we'll do it as a resume piece. We'll shop it around to a couple of affiliates. And if it does well, okay. If not, we have this to kind of to hold on and to have in the can. And released it. And 9 years later, it's been one of the largest and longest running pledge specials from PBS.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and it branded us across the country. I mean, I moved to LA and it was playing on, their PBS affiliates like every week. Chicago, New York, down in Memphis, New Orleans. Lettucey, that's how she heard of me. I mean, she turned on the TV and saw, Soulful Symphony in New
Wow.
Orleans. So yeah, it's been really
This-
good for us. It's been
I
really
mean, and it was so uniquely formatted and programmed. The singers, Mashika. I mean, you just had the right vibe, the right instrumentalists, the right singers, the right. It was superior. And what year was that? What year was that initially?
2008, and it was tough because I mean it looked superior and we pulled it off. But that same weekend, we had Donnie McClurkin. We did our "Say Amen Somebody" with Donnie. So we had even Donnie McClurkin on Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday all day we rehearsed and taped and studio to pull this off. So that was a tough weekend, but
Man, it's unbelievable to see. So, Darin, it's been said that you tend to shift the cultural needle with a new form of entertainment and music that breaks down walls and invites new listeners. So, what is your methodology for doing so?
I mean, it's the continuum of music and musical traditions for me. It's making sure that we're, not just again channeling ourselves to one specific genre of music or one specific experience, and that which happens on stage is something that is reflective of that which is happening in society or people's experience. And that's the thing that connects to people is their experience sonically being kind of echoed back to them, and that's been intentional for me. Moving that needle is making sure that you're playing to people and performing to the community. Toni
Right.
Morrison said that a lot. She said, "I write community music, community
Yeah.
literature."
Yeah.
And that's important. A lot of times we as musicians, we perform for each other, we write for each other. We're
Yeah.
interested more in how musicians perceive what we do instead of how
Right.
we perceive what we do. And it takes an intention in terms of how we're serving the community in that way.
What would you say, what are your some of your most significant commission works and what led to their composition? What led to you originally composing them, putting those
Yeah,
works?
the piece "Evolution of a People" was commissioned by the BSO in 2006, and that is a 2-hour work that I hope to kind of to record at one point. And it goes from Africa to American, dealing with sports and children and women and cowboys. And then went and commissioned me in 2004 to open jazz at Lincoln Center. I did a piece
Oh,
called "Day of Affirmation." So yeah, I to the Morgan Freeman did the narration to a piece I did
wow.
called "Day of Affirmation," a speech from Robert F. Kennedy that he did in South Africa. So when that was amazing. That went and one of my mentors would you know ask me to
Wow.
compose and open up jazz at Lincoln Center. That was 2004. And then just last year for Bernstein Centennial, the Mann Center for the Performing Arts and the Philadelphia Orchestra commissioned me to write what I did a companion piece to Leonard Bernstein's West Side Story, which I called
Mm.
South Symphonic Dances. And so that was a 11 movement a suite for orchestra, but later for dance and fully staged called Southside. So those three are probably my biggest commissions in terms of what I've done in outside just not just soulful symphony space, but with other orchestras and ensembles.
Wow. So tell us about Darin. I'm excited about and congratulations. We want to celebrate you. Tell us about your new role as artistic director of the Downtown Columbia Arts and Culture Commission. Tell us about
Yes,
that.
yeah. Downtown Columbia Arts and Culture Commission is a institution in Columbia, Maryland, which was a city planned by Jim Rouse 50 years ago. And this commission has taken ownership of one of the most esteemed venues around the country, the Merriweather Post Pavilion. They're the owners of this venue, and they're charged with bringing culture back to this venue, it was built for the NSO in 1967. And then the NSO went to Wolf Trap 3 years later, and it kind of turned into this commercial pop venue. And so the commission was charged with bringing back a cultural element to the space. We were approached about coming on as a resident orchestra, and then I came on as artistic director, which not only shapes what's happening with Soulful Symphony in the space, but we're charged with really being the architect of culture in Howard County, Columbia, and the surrounding regions. So everything from the school systems to the arts organizations who are there, they have several arts organizations there, orchestra, choruses, Howard County Community College. So I get to kind of navigate and cultivate a culture beyond just what's happening with Soulful Symphony, which is something I'm really big on in terms of my contribution to the culture. And then Soulful Symphony is the first resident orchestra there, which
wow, yes. Go ahead. Tell us more. Yeah, go ahead.
We have a full season every summer in our new summer home, which is just being reconstructed, $60 million reconstruction, skyboxes.
Yeah.
It's just amazing space. So we do our concerts, but we're also the house orchestra, which means any act, touring, organization, collaboration that comes through that wants the symphony orchestra. Soulful Symphony is there for that, almost like the Hollywood Bowl and the Hollywood Bowl orchestra model.
You froze for a minute there. Tell us again. So you're the house orchestra for this. So tell us what that means again.
Yeah, we're the house orchestra. So Soulful Symphony has its own programming. So we'll do our summer season there, but also the orchestra is the house orchestra. So any artist that comes through collaborations, any festival, any promoter, touring organization that wants an orchestra, we're available for that too. So we're the house orchestra, almost like the Hollywood Bowl and the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra does.
Man,
yeah. So
that's congratulations, man. Just right there. We are so happy and honored that you represent us. And so, I mean, this is so deserving. We're so happy for you. So you remain, Darin, a very strong advocate for arts, culture, and education. So talk about some of your involvement within the political arena and commitment to the cultural agencies.
Yeah, well, a part of Soulful Symphony when we were here in Baltimore was I got introduced to Maryland Citizens for the Arts. I was a trustee on the board, and it was all, this is all new territory for me, maybe 15 years ago. But I began to see how the political levers actually helped us engineer what's happening with us in terms of what we're doing in arts organizations and churches. All of that upstream is somewhere happening in politics. And so whether that's advocating for a budget that takes place from your governor or the federal government, for right now, like the Trump administration is talking about cutting the NDA, the National Endowment of Humanities, all of those, public broadcasting, all of those are political levers that without engagement and advocacy, we're at the risk of having, whether it's education or arts funding, kind of go away. So to be an advocate on something that's just very crucial. In terms of how we begin to sustain and cultivate just the ecosystem of education and culture. It doesn't happen without a certain political levers that get pulled in arts advocacy. So I was really mentored by Doug Mann at the Maryland Citizens for the Arts and Doreen Bolger of the Baltimore Museum of Art. So I've kind of gotten my chops from just being around people who have been on the political and advocacy side for years. And it's important, I'm trying to tell artists all the time, whether it's venue access or all of those commercial things that we think about, at the end of the day, a lot of those things are being pulled politically. And so to just, even if you're not engaged fully, just to be aware of what's happening in terms of copyright or publishing,
right,
certain congressional acts that and influence, musicians' rights, is important to be aware of it.
This is great. So Darin, you have a major performance, something wonderful coming up on tomorrow. I think it's entitled "The Souls of Black Folks." It's a wonderful. Tell us all about it. What's happening with it? Give us all of it.
Yeah, tomorrow we're being presented by New Shiloh Baptist Church. They're undergoing a new capital campaign, and they're presenting us. I call it "The Souls of Black Folk." I took that from W.B. Du Bois.
Right.
Souls of Black Folk, where we're kind of consolidating the tradition of everything from the spiritual to contemporary gospel. And it's our first gospel show that we've done. We used to call it Say Amen Somebody. It was the first full evening of gospel and sacred music that we've done in probably 6 years. And so aside from the gospel music, I'm programming music that I haven't done probably in 15 years. God's Trombones I did back in 2005.
Wow.
So we're doing that. And then Psalm 136, Actually, it was commissioned by my home church, Third Street Church of God, for their
Wow.
centennial, and we performed that at the Potter's House. I think you came to that concert, Potter's House with the Dallas Symphony back in 2001. So we're doing Psalm 136, and you know, a lot of rich music tomorrow.
Great music. Any special soloists? Any special
Oh,
singers?
I mean, everybody's coming out of Soulful Symphony. I mean, we have some of the greatest singers, here on the East Coast. So no special guests, but everybody's coming right out of the
That's
East Coast.
awesome. Are you pulling? Are members formerly that are from past Soulful Symphony are coming
Yeah,
back? And
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So, and it's at Morgan State in their new, well, not new, but the Carl Murphy Gilliam Concert Hall, which is a fabulous space. It's the first time we've been in there. So it's kind of like a full circle moment. The house that Dr. Carter helped build, now I'm bringing back my own symphony orchestra from having that aha moment with him almost 28, 9 ago. So it's amazing.
That's awesome. So if they want tickets, if persons that are watching and just finding out about it, if you want tickets, know how much, and tell us what they need.
At box office, you can go to the box office. It's not our show. I get that a lot, man. How come, what's up with tickets, man? A lot of times we're being presented, and
Right.
we just, showing up to do our thing, but they can go to Ticketmaster, go to Morgan State box office and get that.
Okay, that's
It's
cool.
tomorrow here in Baltimore. Yeah.
That's awesome. Your career has encompassed, Darin, the roles of composer, conductor, pianist, record producer, artist, arranger, film composer, vocalist, entrepreneur, educator, just over arts advocate. So what are some key rubrics for potential and current musicians and artists that are moving towards a career within your arena? Kind of what we touched before, but this is different. You're encompassing so much. And how important is it to do that?
It's important, but I think as you're formulating yourself and your identity and you're curing what you want to do and who you want to be, it's important not to have all those hyphens. I mean, most of those you can
Wow.
focus
Wow.
on. You have to focus on your core skill,
Right.
and you build upon that. I started as I play piano, and it's just piano starts conducting. You start conducting, and you start composing. And so I think to try to take on and formulate who you are in all those different directions at once can be a little bit overwhelming and kind of putting the cart before the horse. But to really master, be intentional about where you are and mastering that step, and all those things will come together. As your gift expands as that makes room for you. But to be very specific about where you are at a given moment in that space, and then
Yeah.
leveraging that space for the next space, I think is important.
And you've modeled that so well. You started as a pianist. We've watched you. We watched you as a composer, conductor. You've stayed in those settings. It's like you've maturated in those particular settings, and then until it was time, moved to the next area and moved to the next. But you've kind of stayed right there and maturing and building your brand and everything in those areas. It's been
Yeah,
phenomenal.
I've tried. It's tough. I mean, it's tough when you're pulled in a lot of different directions, and then you have, you're inclined to do certain things, whether it's vocally or in a certain space. The thing that has taken most of my time, actually, ironically, is the thing that's not seen as much is the strategic and the entrepreneurial side of what I do. I would say like
Mm,
60 to 70% of what I've done in the last 20 years has been on the entrepreneur brand building side of it.
yeah,
I mean, this idea that these partnerships and these residencies are kind of like fall into my lap, but
yeah.
it 4 or 5 years of strategic planning, meeting with stakeholders, and I mean, that's a lot of work. I mean, it's incredible amount of work.
You
Which is
mentioned that you made a statement earlier. You said 20 years. It took 20 years. Rehash that statement again. We were talking about your current position. So you said, and continue further elaborating on how it takes time to build this.
I mean, it's a marathon and not a sprint. And I say,
Wow.
20 years ago, I had a seed of Soulful Symphony that was just a piece of music that it turned into an institution. And at the end of the day, something of that magnitude needs community, it needs institution support. And without it, you're just doing concerts. People always say, how come you're not recording? We don't have enough of your stuff published. But when you're dealing with a symphony orchestra, man, it's not like going into a studio with a choir or with a trio, or I mean, it's just a major undertaking to
Yeah.
sustain that type of institution and organization over 20 years. And a lot of
Mm,
that's done behind the scenes. And it's slow. It's slow, righteous
yeah.
perseverance that you have to, be committed to the long tail of it all. So it's 20 years later, here we are. But it's been a long journey to get here.
Yeah, it has been. But I do want to commend, even with the behind the scenes detail, every time that you've come up from the behind the scenes detail in a performance, it's been superb.
It
So
is.
I would want to say that you want to make sure that whenever you're on the platform,
Absolutely.
that it is going to be remembered as worthy as as a
Absolutely.
performance to
Absolutely.
be remembered. And you have done that. Every performance has been a performance what to be remembered that we've
Yeah, and
not
that
forgotten.
has as much to do with the type of artistry and musicians that I've surrounded myself with. The singers to the rhythm section to the orchestra. I mean, just first class, man. Their professionalism, their profession, their proficiency, their attention to what we do, and it's just been amazing. So, it takes that type of support from the folks you surround yourself with as well. So I'm
Let's,
excited about actually getting back to a lot of the music and getting back to the piano and getting back to
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So we're in a space right now in a place in our history with Soulful Symphony where I'm able to kind of delegate, and people are going to be taking on different roles, so I can kind of focus on that side of it again.
Wow. Darren, what are your life lessons? What would you say some major life lessons that you've learned through your experiences?
Wow. Um, Ultimately, I've learned that all of this work in life is really about the nurturing and the cultivation of our souls. Um,
Mm,
yeah, yeah. I mean, we get caught up in what we do and who we are, but all of that is really building our character. And so for me, it's been
yeah.
challenging, and the struggle has been like, how is this making me a better person? How is it making me a better man? How is it making me a better steward over the things that I have, been given charge over, whether it's myself, my family, my friends. That at the end of the day, it's about what's the evolution of our souls. I mean, how are we evolving as people and as humans? And so that's probably one of the biggest life lessons. And then patience, and understanding that things don't happen overnight, that you have to be committed to the fulfillment of these things, and they don't always happen in our time. That you have to be kind of a believer in the
Yeah.
end of things, and trying to just enjoy it all, to be someone that gives love, that gives,
Mm,
and shows a certain humility and understanding where I fit in the whole scheme of all of this, not being too full of myself. To understand
mm.
at the end of the day, it's about relationships and people. Yeah.
That's awesome, Darren. So, what do you think would be the best way? How can we continue to maintain excellence with our church worship? You're still involved, and I appreciate always hearing your involvement in your church, the times that you have. So, that connect to the church. How do you think we continue to maintain that musical excellence within the church?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the very core of it is always your technical mastery and your technical proficiency. I mean, that speaks to who you are as a citizen in this whole thing of music, and it's just mastering whether that core skill is, and making sure that you're diverse and that you're competent, and at every level you're prepared at any given moment to be available to that. And then for me, number two is always the connection to people. I always say that. I mean, just at the end of the day, it's about relationships and people, and how you take that technical aspect of it and then have the emotional intelligence to now translate that to an audience, which is
Right.
open and allowing yourself to now, speak to another aspect of yourself that has nothing to do with maybe your technique, but maybe it's just the nuance of how you want to express that technique. And then three, the courage and the power to believe in your own voice and the platform and the influence that you have, and that no matter where that influence is, or whether that voice is, that you have the courage to pursue that. A lot of times we get caught up on how big our stage is or how wide our
Wow.
influence, our sphere of influence, but just believing that your impact wherever you are is meaningful, and is something that people are blessed by, and believing in the power of your own voice. And this whole crowd of the marketplace where everybody's doing
Yeah.
everything,
Yes.
and this social media now. I mean, I talk to younger musicians. I don't know how I could have. I'm sure it would have been tough for me 30 years ago, competing with all seeing what's happening and hearing what's happening, and to kind of incubate your own voice from all of that is tough.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so, and the courage to say, this is who I am, this is my experience, this is what I'm bringing to the table, and to kind of like protect that and to have the courage to continue to pursue it with all of these things pulling on us about who we should be and why
Yes.
we're doing this,
Yeah.
why we're doing that.
Yes. Wow, this is great. So, Darren, tell us about the new exciting things coming on the horizon. I know tomorrow it's a great concert. We know about the new assignment that you've been given, but tell anything that you can talk about that's coming up
Yeah,
on the
I
horizon.
mean, aside from the season this year, I'm doing a musical on Ruby McCullough, who was uh,
Mm,
she was an African American that was involved in this murder and shooting in Florida almost 45, 50 years ago, where Zora Hurston went down and it was like this whole expose and provocative in terms of race. And so I'm writing a musical theater piece on that that's going to be staged next year in Sarasota, Florida, and then up to Public Theater in New York next year. So I'm excited about that. And then finally finishing my record that I started like 3 or 4 years ago, Stone Tablets. We're going to get in and finish that up. So
okay.
and release that this summer. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So we have a large audience of all kinds, pastors, theologians, artists, composers. I saw Aaron Manswell, who we mentioned earlier, that composition major at University of Memphis. So tell them three core standards you deem necessary for musical excellence. There, look, these are the three core standards I live by. I recommend for you, each of you.
Yeah. Again, I go back to being technically proficient, technical mastery. That's key for me. Um, Again, two, I said these. I'm kind of regurgitating myself, but being accessible to people, relationships, understanding
Yeah,
that you're performing. It's not about you. It's about people.
right.
It's always about community. It's about how you're serving others and how you're using your gift to serve others. Aside
Yeah,
from that being someone that is easy to work with, having a great spirit. I mean, being talented and proficient and having all these skills that don't mean anything if you don't know how to kind of relate and you're collegial and you know how to camaraderie, being
right,
down to earth, and not being somebody that's hard to work with. I mean, all those things are just crucial. And just courage to, I mean, music is tough, man. The arts are tough. The pursuance of it is tough. I mean, just the courage to speak your own voice, to
hmm,
as unique as your fingerprint. I think we need more diversity in terms of what is your voice? What do you have to say that I'm not saying, that this person is not saying? Everything has been homogenized. Everybody wants to do the same thing. They want to sound alike.
right, right,
I mean, everybody is, but the courage to say, hey, this is what I have to say. This is who I
right.
am as a musician. This is my voice. And find for that. I mean, it might not be the place that I have, the place that you have. There's a place for that, and it will make room for itself if you pursue it that way.
Oh man, thank you so much. Well, folks, you have it. This is Darin Atwater. I thank you so much for your time, Darin, and sharing of your heart. I think this is information. So, audience, please share the information you've received today. I'm excited. Just a few announcements, and Darin's going to close us out. Our guest for next week will be none other than Cyrus Chestnut, who'll be with us April 19th. He'll be here in Memphis live April 4th for a rehearsal with our choir on the Saga of the Cross. I have some information about that. So do want you to know that our guest next week will be Cyrus Chestnut. I'll have the flyer and let you know in terms of how we'll do that and how he will, what time and all the times that we'll formulate that. We do want to make mention, No Gimmicks book is available for you. I had a copy of it here. I think you've seen it enough, but you know where to go on Amazon.com, Barnes and Noble, God'sChild.com. Thank you so much for your support and buying and purchasing the book, and the workbook is also available. So it would be a great help and aid to your church. Next, on this Sunday, I want to mention this Sunday, we saw Jason Ferdinand has been a part, Dr. Jason Ferdinand. Hey, Jason, we certainly appreciate you and celebrate you, all that you've done and you continue to give. The Aeolians will be at Mississippi Boulevard this weekend, Sunday at 9 a.m. 9 a.m. at the Southwind location and 10:30 at our Midtown location. You don't want to miss it. No afternoon concert, just to some of the morning worship services. Come on out and be with us and hear this magnificent group. One of the best, one of the greatest. Hey, Pam Davis, always good to see you. She's a gem and a fabulous musician. And she will be interviewed in May. Get ready, Pam. Our guest, I mentioned Cyrus Chestnut. Aeolians will be with us Sunday. Mark your calendars for Friday, April 19th, 6:30 p.m. Good Friday with Cyrus Chestnut. entitled this word composition, The Saga of the Cross. We just got word that Kirk Whalum will be appearing also with Cyrus, so it is going to be great. The choir's doing a great job. You're going to have Pastor Daryl Pettis with us. We'll be doing a Dr. Watts. You'll have others involved. It is going to be a night to remember. Friday, April 19th, 6:30, free admission. The Saga of the Cross with Cyrus Chestnut and others. Brandy Inez Sutton will be our special guest, and as well as Kirk Whalum. So we look for all of you then. Easter Sunday is going to be magnificent. Don't want to miss if you're available. And the Boulevard, Crystal Rucker will be our guest with our choir and brass. So it's just going to be we got a lot going on, a lot of important and exciting things going on. Darin, we're going to end with a final quote, and guess where this quote is coming from? It's a quote by our own guest, Darin Atwater. He's been giving us some nuggets. He says, "You had one opportunity for someone else to do the work of pushing you into greatness. And that was when your blessed mother birthed you. The rest of this, you got to go get yourself. Greatness is a hard work," by Darin Atwater. Thank you so much, Darin. Darin, you want to close us out in prayer?
Yeah, before I do, I just want to thank you, Leo, for all that you do. This format is amazing. I mean, you're capturing so much history, and you're the gold standard for worship and sacred and music down in Memphis. So I'm inspired by you.
That means a lot.
Continue to pursue excellence.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Father, we thank you for this time. Thank you for Leo and this awesome platform, this ministry, how he's influencing so many. Thank you for those under his tutelage and those who stand alongside him to make this possible. I pray that everything we've said today would be energized and it would be fueled by your favor and your blessing that would impact, and it would be a seed that you would cultivate and grow in those listeners. Bless us as we leave this place, but never your presence. In your name I pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you, buddy. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you. Love you, man. We'll be in touch. All the best for tomorrow's performance.
Thank you, brother.
All right. Take care.